Ventilation engineer, 12 grand of our money, a third of the total, off he goes. Gone. See something that these guys have done and you go, whoa, okay. It's an old barn conversion.
Hello and good welcome to the Self Builders podcast sponsored by Mayflower Mortgage and Finance. I'm your host, Mike Pawley. I'm flying solo today. Sam's off sick, the usual co-host, but I'm sure he'll be back for us next week. Today, I am really excited because we're speaking to Charles, who is a client of Mayflower's, who's building his own property, and he's kindly spared some of his time to come on to share all the do's and don'ts about his project, and hopefully we can help someone out there who's listening. How are you doing, Charles?
I'm good, Mike. Thanks for having me on today.
No, like I said, I'm genuinely really looking forward to it. So why don't we start by tell us a little bit about the project, paint the picture, sort of what the house is like, the finish, the outer skin. Is it brick? Is it? So really get a vision in their brain.
It's really a simple one. It's I guess a lot of people dream about doing this, which is it's an old barn conversion.
Okay.
So it's a old Victorian stone building with some derelict pieces to it and some pieces that basically needed rebuilding completely. So imagine your archetypal Cotswold barn, front and back. It's just like a picture postcard, but it was basically in ruins when we found it. So it's quite an exciting one because it took us about 4 years to find it.
Wow. Okay.
And I guess that in itself was a sort of a really interesting learning experience because you go into these things thinking, oh, great, I'll go on a Rightmove and find a property. And you start looking and it was a decision that my wife and I made that once the children reached a certain age and really they were no longer here at home all the time, we'd look to move out of where we were, close into London, move a bit further out, and that whole sort of change of pace a little bit. I have the ability to work remotely. So as long as I've got a good internet link, and I'm sure that's the same with so many people now, I can get into London, so long as I can be in London 2 or 3 times a week if need be. That was really the criteria I set myself. So we were pretty tight on what sort of criteria we set to find a place, which is probably why it took us a long time to find the ideal property. The other thing was, the other thing was, quite honestly, it's real grey hair. It's not dye.
At least you've got hair, Charles.
Well, but you've got to find. Yeah, but anyway, right. But the point being that actually I felt, and my wife felt, that it wasn't practical. We'd known people, or we'd read about people and seen lots of television programs about people who lived in mobile caravans on site, and quite frankly, we didn't feel that at our stage of life we really wanted to do that. So we wanted to find something that fitted that bill as well, that allowed us to find a property where actually, or we could do something, we could live in a property and then do the build from there. So that was really the criteria. It's quite a tough criteria to find. And we used all the regular sort of outlets, Rightmove, Zoopla, all of these places. And really, the interesting bit about those was that we were able to look at the types of properties that came up within a range, and types of a sale of plots even that came within a range sort of which we felt was geographically suitable for us.
Yeah.
So that was where we started, and then we started narrowing down sort of hotspots of where we were interested in. And at that point, I think that's probably the time I started discovering things like the Build Hub, and which is an online community, and Build Store, and a couple of the other sort of sources that there are for these plot finder, another one, and obviously your own Mayflower plot finder service. And so we started looking at those as well. And finally, 2 years ago, actually, just over almost exactly 2 years ago, October, we were, one of the alerts I had on Rightmove, funnily enough, pinged me. We saw this, and it was only actually the third plot we'd been to see over that 4-year period. So
there's only those 3 that met the criteria that you guys had set.
pretty much.
Yeah.
So we were really tight on that. Now, obviously, other people can be looser in their definition, but what
Yeah.
I'd say, and the tip that I've learned from that, Mike, is you do need to be really mindful of what you want out of this. You know, if you go in and you say, "Well, I'll just take anything," sure, I'm sure you can, but you've got to think, what do you want out at the other end? So we were very, very, very sort of we were quite tight on that criteria. And so that's really what we found. And 2 years ago, this thing pinged up. We came and saw it and knew immediately. Literally, we just knew driving down the road. It was one of those, wow, this is it. Plot amazing. Yeah, just what we wanted, and it came with planning permission.
You've read my mind. I was just about to
Yeah.
ask how did the planning go? Okay, so
Well,
did it have a full permission, Charles, or was it with a Class Q
no,
permitted?
it had full permission. The big problem we've had, and this is a lesson again, this is one of those big lessons that we've learned, is that it's actually, whilst the building itself is not listed, it sits within the grounds or the ex grounds of a listed farmhouse.
Yeah.
Now that causes, because it's classified as curtilage, that causes problems, because as far as planning is concerned, that's considered listed. It's not, as far as I'm concerned or anyone else is concerned, but as a result, it does mean that when we've interacted with planning, which we've had to do because of the fact that it's a big build, it's time consuming, it's confusing, and really what we've ended up doing now is we've engaged a consultant who acts on our behalf for us with planning, because actually, and this is the truth of this is that local planning authorities don't really know very much about listed buildings, and Heritage England, who have that part of it, and the conservation people, it's all very complicated and it all overlaps. And you throw into the mix that actually planning doesn't understand about the other critical element, which is building controls, i.e.
They don't speak to each other very
They
much.
don't speak to each other.
Yeah.
They don't speak to each other, and they don't actually understand. So planning will say, yes, you can put a bedroom here, for example, in this wing. You go to building control and they go, well, you can't, because there's no window, and you can't put a window in because it's listed. So, this is the type of thing that you end up in, this sort of circle of doom if you let yourself. So you have to be creative. You have to talk to lots of people. And again, this is where the consultants really come in, because as long as it's somebody who's got local experience of dealing with local planning authorities, local building control people, they can have those discussions. They can talk to you, and they can also let you know what's realistically likely to fly or not. And I think that's what I'd say is biggest tip. If it's complicated, if the planning looks complicated, don't wait. Get a consultant on board. Go and find someone and say, look, what's it going to cost me? Because as a percentage of what you end up spending, and the time and money and time and effort you end up spending spinning your wheels, remember, each time you submit a planning application, it's potentially a 3-month process before they respond, and it's money. Yeah. So, we've burned probably a couple of thousand just on planning applications, and we've burned probably 9 or 12 months now, because we started putting these things in, and we didn't realize initially this was the type of thing. And even to the point where we've had planning permission granted for things, then we've realized that planning haven't talked to listed buildings. So we need to then go back.
Which is obviously more time, more
Correct.
money. It's interesting you say that, because if you could A/B test life, obviously everyone would go, you'd know which way to go, wouldn't you? But yeah, anecdotally, you hear it a lot doing what we do. When people go, oh, we should have got this planning consultant in at this point, or this PM who's been brilliant and taking over the project and really delivered on what's we couldn't do, or someone else couldn't do. So you guys, you've obviously changed planning slightly to what was agreed.
Yeah, we've just the very. So we took, when we got planning, when we bought the plot. I mean, it had full planning for a conversion of the agricultural building into a 4-bedroom house. So we had that that in writing, but obviously when you look at those plans and you start thinking, well, this is a self-build. This isn't. I'm not buying a wimpy home. There's nothing wrong with a wimpy home, but I'm not buying a box which I'm going to live in. I want to actually live in something that I want to have an influence over. So we changed one or two of the things on there, and I think that there was some that again caused delays. But the interesting piece about this is that there is a piece that links into the financing side of it as well, which is that you need to make sure that, and quite frankly, I cannot fault either um, either yourselves at Mayflower, who arranged the funding for us, or Harpenden Building Society, who are our lenders.
They
And
are
they
really good, to be honest with you.
absolutely,
They understand the space as well.
totally, yeah. And whilst they're not the fastest, and I'd say they're not. If you're used to dealing in the sort of click and go way,
Nationwide, the traditional,
yeah,
different
then forget
underwriting
it.
process.
This is not, and the reason it is very simple. You have to remember that everything is a personal approach. They look at everything, and I think there are people. That there are people. When somebody says it's gone in front of an underwriter, that's not a computer that's going. Algorithm says no. It's a person. It's a person, and that the comments that come back are from people. They're actually from people. So and that's so important. And again, this again goes down to the fact that your lovely Glenn Chandler, who is one of your guys, who has been phenomenal in holding our hand through a very, very complex process.
Really nice. I'll tell Glenn. We'll get a snippet for Glenn.
Yeah,
you send that to him. That audio snippet.
And you know what? I have to say something else, Mike. I'm on a lot of these forums for self-builds and stuff. His name is actually on quite a few of those with a big tick against it. So there you go.
Really
That's
really
seriously. I before I chose Mayflower, I actually spoke to the major self-build lender and another independent.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it was when I explained what I was looking for. I found a property, and the major self-build lender said, "Oh, did you say that the barn is next? The barn, which is a part of a farm, is next to an equestrian business?" And I said, "Yes." "Oh, our lenders won't lend to a place that's close to an equestrian business." And I went, "Right, I think the call's over. Thanks very much. Bye bye." It's that the computer says no response that I got out of those other people compared to the actual hands-on. Real feeling that went into finding the right funder for this project, and also the right funder for us, and that's what came out of Glenn and Mayflower. So
really nice to hear. It's easy for us to say it is more nuanced and complex than sort of your traditional purchase product, and it really is. And having someone that does it every day does make a difference. I think, but it's nice to hear it from.
No. You are absolutely right, and I absolutely mean it. It's totally. I've bought. I'm in my 50s, and we've moved house a few times in our lives, and I've had probably 4 or 5 different mortgage products at least. And quite frankly, if you're buying a semi-detached house in the middle of Ruislip or something, then that's fine. You've got the ability to take a standard off the shelf in a box package.
Yeah,
but that's not what we're doing here. And quite frankly, there's so many complexities about this. It's really nice to have somebody who really understands it and has been through it before. So a good example of that is when we came to actually, there was some confusion about levels of insurance on the plot. You need plot insurance, you need site insurance, and it makes your head spin because you also need contents insurance where you're living, and you can't quite work out what's what.
To have started to build at this point in time either.
That's exactly it. And your eyes are popping out your head, and you've got a builder and say, "What insurance do you want from me?" And you don't know because you've never been through this before. But having somebody there who just goes, "Right, this is what you need. These are the steps. Breathe deeply, keep calm. It's all okay. Here's what you do." And having that is just phenomenal. It's just so encouraging to have that side of it. If you have to borrow money to do this type of project, which most of us do, having someone who understands that process and actually has experienced it and can walk you through it it's priceless. It really is. It's worth all the money. So I'm a big fan of Glenn and what he's done, and that continues this day. We still have emails between each other and. How's the family and all this sort of stuff. So it is really about a relationship that you set up, and it continues through this process. So and where we are now. Do you want me to talk about that? I
Yes,
guess
please.
probably.
I was just about to ask. So, where are you in the build, and sort of how involved you've been, and those sorts of things?
Okay, so I mean, I think like most people, we went through a process of we initially went out to tender and eventually found ourselves with a builder that we were really comfortable with, who'd done a lot of local work, and then we were due to we were discussing times for him to start sometime middle of this year. And this is towards the end of last year, probably December last year. And literally at the last minute, he had a client pull the project from him. So him and his team became free
Oh,
just before Christmas, and so we went from wanting to start the project in probably March, April, probably May time, to actually kicking off at the very. We literally had scaffolders here in between Christmas and New Year last year. So suddenly, and we'd only really completed, because of some complexities, legal complexities. We only actually completed on the property sort of early December. So it was.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and we're lucky enough to live on site, or unlucky enough. Comes pros and cons with, well, yeah, we'll look at that in a moment. But I mean, you might hear the beeping of the dumper literally outside the front here, reversing backwards and forwards, doing drains. But the point is that we were able to accelerate that process and jump straight in. It was a good thing, and a bad thing as well, but it was really a good thing. We hadn't actually finished sorting out the mortgage at that point, so we had to self-fund some of the beginning of that build. And we'll come to numbers. I'm sure you'll want to talk about numbers later.
If you don't mind, that'd be really interesting. I think
Yeah,
that's what people usually like to hear.
yeah. It was I think the numbers. I'll come to the numbers in a bit, because I think the project, to walk you through the project process of
Yes,
where we
please.
are, because
Yeah, yeah.
because of the state of this, we have, one has to be very careful. Again, imagine your dream Cotswold barn. Yeah, lovely, great, wonderful. Everyone
Stone
goes,
barn.
barn, barn,
Yeah, no.
beautiful. All those beautiful things that you imagine.
You single
Um,
story holes, or is it sort of a one and
no,
a half?
no, it's a story and a half. So
Okay.
we've done it. We've made it. We're making it so that, and this is one of the things we changed. We didn't want to lose the barn feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So we've effectively created a very, very big sort of open plan area in the middle of the barn, where between the entrance and the back, if you like, which is a huge reception area, and it's vaulted, and it's nearly 7 meters high. So it's huge, and it's got the bit that we really loved is all the timber work inside. Now, this is the bit where I link back to where we started from, because actually we loved all that, and we've designed all this to retain the Barney feeling, as we say. But when we started, we knew that we were going to have to do some work, because the roof was falling in, and some of the big trusses had rotted. So we knew that there was some engineering work. We had a structural engineer on board. Again, top tip: make sure you've got a really good structural engineer if you're going to do something like this. He's been invaluable. Again, costly. It does frustrate me every time I have to sign the check for all these professionals, but quite frankly, you need
Structural
them.
engineer, I would imagine, is very important.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And if you see the work that they've done, basically we ended up having to, rather than repairing a few roof timbers, which is what I thought we'd do, and retiling and replacing some tiles, we eventually had to take the whole roof off. So there was a point, and then one of the gable walls partially fell down. So we literally, in February, by February, my wife and I stood here in our cottage on site going, what have we bought? We've bought 3.5 walls of Cotswold stone and nothing more.
Really tough with conversions though, because sometimes you don't know until you get going what you're
that's
in for.
that's one of the tips I'd say, Mike. I think if I were, to be totally candid, I think that we were very naive to believe that we could do this within the defined budget that we had, even though we'd allowed a 25% contingency. We were very, very naive, because the contingency, because we ended up having to take the roof off, we had to replace every single roof timber except the main trusses. 2 of those out of 5 we had to repair. So, and because it's listed as well, you have to be incredibly careful. You have to use, original materials and scarf joints and everything else. So, and it was elm. It blew my mind how much it
Yeah.
cost just to
Yeah.
put the roof back on. So within 3 months, which was pretty much the time when we were sort of getting the mortgage together, we'd pretty much blown straight through our contingency.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Just because it's a really costly job. You can't, hiring cranes and taking bits off. And as my builder says, you could have built a nine, instead of renovating 3,500 square foot, he said you could have built a 9,500 square foot house for this. So
Like we just said, really tough though. You budgeted on what you expected, and so you don't know sometimes until you get going. It does happen a fair amount of the time with existing older dwellings. I've been there, and you get
yeah,
going, and it's just
and it just every time you do something, there's a number of other things that need to be done to make sure that we're going to replace a roof timber. Well, that means you're going to take the roof off. Oh, well, that means you're going to replace every single one of the tiles because all of them are broken or in a state where you can't put them back. Oh, right, okay. Well, actually, oh, look, the gable wall's fallen down, so we've got to rebuild the gable wall. And that theme is one that continued for the first half of this year, whilst we were sort of
making
repairing the fabric and replacing the bits that needed replacing. There were some walls in place. They became very clear that whilst we'd surveyed them before, that actually, when it came down to it, the weather changed. If you remember this time, sort of in the beginning of this year and actually at the end of last year, we'd surveyed the property in the summer of 2020, whatever last year was, 2023, when it was dry. Wind forward 6 months, the weather has been soaking for sort of 3 months. We came to start looking at the building and looking at the foundations and building off the walls that were existing. And the engineer turned around and said, there's no foundations. They're just going to collapse if we build on them. So you go, oh no, what are we going to do? We're going to have to go to planning and talk to planning and tell them what we're going to do. And then we're going to have to rebuild everything.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there's more cost, more time. So that's the type of thing we need to, I think everyone needs to be aware that the best plan in the world, and I had every single detail of this plan, of this build, down to I mean, like where the light switches were going to go, the cost of the light switches, everything. That side of it's really easy. It's just the bits that you don't see, as you just said, Mike, that you can't, the bits that you just don't know. It's the unknown unknowns, if you like.
exactly that. On existing dwellings is always the So I always ask the guys as a sort of standard operating procedure, if you like, when we're speaking to people that are renovating sort of older barn buildings. Normally, we get quite a lot of those. Um, Ask if there's a structural report, um, because at least that gives a good baseline understanding of what the structure's like. Because it can really unfold a little otherwise later down the line.
We were lucky; we didn't have to underpin the main barn, so
Okay.
that, touch wood, that saved us 100 grand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you can say it like that, because exactly as you
That
say,
happens though.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was a touch and go situation with, as I say, the with the state of the ground, because it got so saturated, we were worried about it. But as a result of the saturation, we then had another problem. We had water. And that was the other thing that I would say, watch out for drainage. And I know everyone says drainage is that unknown, but actually it's one of those things where, um, you know, on the plans, there was a drainage plan. And the drainage plan had it all set out. There was main drains connection, which is unusual around here, which had been done, and there was all the floodwater or the rainwater drainage had already been, apparently had been connected. We couldn't understand why we had a lot of water coming in until we actually dug the foundations of one of the wings, and we discovered that at some point in the last 30 years, someone at some point had cut through the main connection between this property and the next door, which used to be part of the same farm. They'd cut through the flood drain. So basically, all of the water from the roofs of every single property around here was ending up at the front of our building and just going straight through into it.
That's
So
a known unknown, isn't it? But that's not something you can build in a
no,
contingency for.
you can't. Is again, it's another example of one of those things where your contingency needs to be big enough to deal with that.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then you're gonna run into trouble. But you need to make sure that. And again, we were lucky. We've been able to dig into some savings on top of what our budgets were and so forth to take that hit. But we also had to tank. But as a result of that, we've fully waterproofed the whole building. So the whole building now is tanked. And today they're putting in the sump pumps to make that. So where we are in the build, which is probably where you want to get to, is we now are we're just glazing. We're finishing the glazing this week.
Okay.
And we're wind and watertight effectively. And the screed and underfloor heating will be in by Christmas. So we're hoping that during January we can actually switch the pump on and actually start drying the place out. And then we'll be
done. Internal fit out, you the superstructure's all in, groundwork's all good. You're plain sailing, really, I would say.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, once that, I think I look at it a little bit like forecasting how much you're going to spend on a project like this is a little bit like long range weather forecasting. The further away from a point you are, the less accurate you are in that forecast.
Yeah.
And you've got to have that flexibility in your budgeting. And again, big tip, make sure your funder is flexible, because if you need to draw money down, tomorrow or whatever, you need to be able to call them up and go, help, I need some money. And actually Harpenden have been really, really good. I think you need to make sure you give all lenders enough notice to do that.
They need an interim inspection.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't always need one, but if they do want one, on surveyor then.
It's one of those. I think there's a sort of almost like a tick box exercise with some people that need them. It's not, it's not like we haven't. If you were to borrow against this as a finished property, the loan to value will be very low because of the amount of equity we put in. But even so, some lenders just sort of almost a peace of mind thing, just to say we just make sure you're doing the work. I think
and there's not any car on the drive or something like that.
Yeah,
the reason.
Exactly. So
I want to ask you about some numbers, Charles, just with regards to sort of, so where you guys are. So what did you originally budget, if you don't mind sort of giving a rough?
The original budget was around 700. We'd agreed to borrow.
So about £200,000 a square metre.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. 200 and I think it was working out about £220 a square metre is what we sort of 200 to 220 a square metre was where we
220 a square foot. That would have been
a square foot. 2,500 square metre. So somewhere around there was what we sort of budgeted for, and I think and actually, funnily enough, that has been the most accurate. That's been the most accurate sort of budgeting exercise, because we've actually, because we've changed the plans, we've expanded the footprint a little bit. We haven't expanded the footprint, but we've changed. There was a carport which was actually completely surplus. This is we've got acres of land and massive great farmyard, and we have no intention of putting our cars in a carport. It's a beautiful building. I'm not going to build hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds worth of property to put to live in with my cars next to my bed. So no, I'm sorry. I don't mind building a detached garage or something like that, but I just didn't want to have this car thing in the house. So no, we've changed that. So we've pushed out we've applied for, and we've had planning permission agreed, and we're just waiting for the final tick box, but it's all agreed. So that we effectively have pushed out the square meterage a little bit. I think we've gained about 30, about what is it? It must be probably about 35 to 40 square meters. So it's
so you're still in that figure, you think?
Yeah. So we're all in the same envelope. Nothing's changed. Everything's been agreed. So it's just that obviously that there's a little bit more cost involved in that, but it's not major compared to what we've budgeted and what's already been spent. So that again is something you need to be aware of, particularly with a project that is like this, or anything that's a renovation, I suspect. you do tend to you can't be 100%. Whilst everybody, I mean, I came in with an absolutely fixed, concrete, plan of what we were going to have, and work with the architect to produce that in a format that would be acceptable to everybody.
Yeah.
And then as things unfolded, you have to be able to have some flexibility in that in a building like this. You're not building from a set of plans that it's just not possible to do it in a building like this, where you have this changing dynamic, and the fabric of the building is in some ways is not as secure. It's just not secure in certain places, and you start realizing
you get going. You didn't know there was a kindly neighbour 40 years ago that chopped into the pipe.
exactly. It's things like that where you say, well, okay, well, as a result of that, you've got to put a drain underneath the building, and you've got to do X and Y. And it doesn't matter just really what you do. You've got to have a bit of flexibility, and that costs. There's always a financial impact to that, as you know, when you change the plans. So having that is where we've come out at. But I think we budgeted for around 700, and we'll end up around. I'm going to say about 800 to 825.
Okay.
Which,
in fairness, with the additional works, it's not a huge percentage.
Really, I mean, it is and it isn't. And when people say, well, what's it worth? And I think that's always the thing that people say, what's it worth?
Tough
And
with
it's like,
your own home.
It's our own home, and we build our own home. And when somebody says, well, what's it worth? I'll say it's worth the fact that I know I've put in a dog bath in our utility room, so that when the filth come in from the fields, I can bathe them.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. And people look like I'm mad. You don't need that. No, I don't need that. But I built my own home, so why wouldn't I put it in?
Those, I think.
I mean, you don't need an ashtray on a motorbike, but if I built my own motorbike, maybe I'd put an ashtray on the motorbike. Yeah, I don't know. There's we built what we want. I mean, and that's the beauty of this, and that's the user chooser. You're not putting up with what somebody else has done and what they've said you need to have. There are certain certain regulations you need to comply to, but effectively, we wanted an environmentally sustainable home, so we've built it with considerably more insulation than we needed for building regs purposes. We're running an air source heat pump. Initially, I can't afford the solar panels, but we're putting a battery in so that we'll be able to charge everything overnight on the cheap rates and run it fairly cheaply. The heating, the estimates that we get from the heating that's going to be in there from an electric heating perspective will be, it'll be less than half what we're spending in our little tiny cottage, 2-bedroom cottage at the moment that's got no insulation in it. I wanted to do those things. We wanted somewhere that's got a beautiful view. It's got all those things that you ask for, and
priceless potentially, isn't it? When you build a place you want to be.
Yeah,
it's without sounding too cheesy.
It is. Sorry, it is cheesy, but that's what you want to. Part of what this is, and this is the whole point about what you do and what Mayflower does, and what we've been involved in, is it's a lifestyle choice. Is it? I know that some people say, well, is it good or is it bad? Well, it's not really it's good or bad situation. There's a certain pain that goes through this. You have your highs and you have your lows with this, Mike. And I'm sure that what you want to hear about that probably too, don't you?
Well, it sounds like you've given us a lot of the lows to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I think we have. I think the highs are actually when it's getting up in the morning. It's days like today when the sun is shining, and I walk out the front door here, and I have this. The sun is coming through all of the glass that's there, and it's that, and there's this incredible vista. And I think, and then and sometimes when you have your lows, you have to. I keep a diary, but I also keep a photo diary, a photo journal. And when things have been really, really low, when I think the drainage, when we had it, actually, I thought we were doing a reenactment of the film 2017. You've seen the film, Mike? Have you seen the film?
Is it where the big flood comes in?
No, it's the Somme. It's in the Somme. No,
okay.
1970, in the Somme, in the First World War. Yeah. I swear that I kept thinking that I was going to see someone pop a little helmet come out from underneath from one of the trenches.
Yeah.
We had 2-meter trenches all the way out in our garden, dozens of them, whilst we were trying to sort out the water. And I think that to me was the lowest point ever. It was like, oh, what have we done? Because basically we were flooded and we were trying to get rid of water, and that was obviously a big problem. But you have to consider that in the grander scheme of things. And again, I think with the advantage of age, you realize you can step back a little bit. One has to step back and just reflect on where you've come from with a project like this. And this is the same for any self-builder. I think you look at that first,
to be honest, Charles.
Sorry.
Good advice in general.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but you have to. I mean, you have to, because we all get stuck in the minutiae of the moment, whether it's, oh, my bins didn't get emptied today, or, oh, my plumber, my heating's leaking, or something, and we all see that as being absolutely critical for our survival. But, at the end of the day, most of us, luckily, who are looking at this podcast, don't have that position. They're in a position of luxury. We live in good houses. We live in houses, and we have roofs over our heads, and we're making choices that most people would, give their back teeth for. So, you have to look at it that way, because otherwise, sometimes you'd go mad if you didn't. But yeah, I think that those are the lows there, and the highs. The highs. Well, every time I go out and I walk into the place, and particularly now, it's nearly winter water, and you just have this amazing, wow. I look out here and look at all the beautiful stonework that's been done. I say another tip, actually. I have to give you this one as well. And someone told me,
recap them all, because I think you've given some really good. There's 3 or 4 top tips.
Yeah, there's a couple I'd say as well. When you take a project like this on, you think. I thought that when I said, "Oh yes, we'll need 150 tons or 250 tons of Cotswold stone," or stone. That's what I. So you imagine that you're going to call Amazon up and say, right, can you deliver a couple of 100 tons of this stuff? That's not how it works. I'd say a little secret. That's not how it works. Somebody finds a large rock, and then somebody else takes a large hammer and goes, that's about right. And that happens with every single one of these. I couldn't, for the first 3 weeks, I just couldn't get over. I kept getting up in the morning going, what are these people doing? They're all with, they're making bricks, and that's what they're doing. And a friend of mine had told me this about a flint house that he built, and told me that this is just the most arduous thing. Really, it's just mind-blowing. It's what it is here. So any natural stone building, really, if you want to fit into the vernacular, and particularly where you've got planning constraints,
they look beautiful though, but they do get more expensive.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And you're paying somebody who's not cheap to just stand there and knock a brick, create a brick every few minutes. So that's something you need to be really mindful of. And I also felt that
laying as well, Charles, isn't it?
That was as bad as say. It's the labor involved, and because these guys are artisans generally, and people, if you've got a good build team like we have, they really care. They really care. I see the stonemason out there sometimes, and he's literally going through individual stone rocks, going, okay, with a tape measure, and then he's going to the wall and he's just putting it in, and it's like, that's probably just cost me £10 in labour, just trying to find that stone. Yeah. It's that sort of, but you have to realise that's what's involved, and also appreciate. And for us, my wife as well, we go out there on days, and that's the wows when we go out and we see something that these guys have done, and you go, whoa, okay, the brick detailing and the actual care that goes into the tiling or whatever it is, and you go, wow, that's pretty special. And that's done, and they're doing it for you, not for somebody else, not for Wimpy Homes, not for ABC PLC. It's for Charles and Jeanette, and that's how it is. So that's the thing. And the final big tip, and this is one that I have been badly bitten by: pay for everything that you want to pay for, whether it's glazing, bits of heating staff, whatever. Pay for it on a credit card.
I'm sure someone else has given us that tip in the past.
Right. You should have this across the whole banner of your website, because we've just lost £12,000 to a heating engineer going bust.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
If we had paid
Well, isn't it? Top
if
tip.
we paid £1 of that on a credit card, the whole lot is reclaimable.
That is a top tip.
Yeah. It's the credit, I think it's called the credit rule of 75, but it's basically a law that means that if you pay for anything with a credit card, no matter how much or contribute towards it, so long as the total value is less than £30,000, they will reinstate the whole lot. If it's over £30,000, I think that they'll pay back up to 30. So it's a no-brainer. And even if it's something you know that you're going to pay for out of your, or it's coming out of a different budget, pay for some of it. Just pay for £20 of it on a credit card, because then everything's covered. Even I've just had umpteen tens of thousands, or lots and lots and lots of value of windows put in. I made sure that I did pay for a little bit of that on a credit card, because you're giving all of this money to someone, a lot of it in advance. And
for Windows,
yes,
in advance, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's something, again. Windows is interesting. Out of the 5 window companies we engaged, 4 of them wanted all the money up front, everything up front, either in stages of 50%, 12 weeks before, and the rest 2 weeks before they install. It doesn't have to be that way. You can find good window companies. Go and find someone who is prepared to retain 20% or 25% until you're happy. Because
it feels fair, doesn't it, as well?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, but it's amazing. We have literally got to the point with our chosen window provider, our first provider. We got to the point where they wanted 50% 12 weeks in advance, and the remaining 50% 6 weeks in advance.
Yeah.
And I said, well, no, I need a retainer. And they said, we can't do one. And I said, well, I can't do business with you.
Yeah.
And they walked away.
I'll feed in a top tip on this one for others that are doing this and maybe can't find favourable terms. You can take something called an advanced payment bond, which is not an insurance policy technically, but very similar to an insurance policy, where the bond holder will underwrite who underwrites the bond essentially will hold the risk of the advanced payment. And if that company goes bust, there's 2 types you can use, but you can effectively claim 100% of it back from the bond. It costs you. They're normally about 8 to 10% of the
value.
Yeah. So but usually you could try and lay it onto the company. So there's a few ways around it, but it is a real top tip, particularly in construction, renowned for people going under.
And quite frankly, I mean, we know, as I say, this guy, our heating and ventilation engineer, 12 grand of our money, a third of the total, off he goes, gone, evaporated.
That is an absolute top tip bombshell. I think we should end it on that one. So let's round up quickly. I want to respect your time. So the top tip is pay on the credit card. I think that is awesome. I mean, you save people money there, that for sure. The other one was, if there's complexities around planning, try and engage a professional as early as you can to try and save those resubmissions and extra cost and extra time. The other one was drainage on the site, which you mentioned. Just get an idea of I suppose, topography along with the drainage as early as you can. The terms, try and get some terms that aren't unfavourable or unfair, which might sound common sense, but I suppose if you're speaking to 3 or 4 or 5 different people and they're all saying a similar thing, you may be, railroaded to a certain extent to go down to where you want to.
You are, and actually, the comment that came back to me from our chosen window provider, who we didn't go with in the end, was there's nobody that will offer you better terms than us, and that was a barefaced lie.
And then shout out the guys who you used in the end.
Yeah, I do, absolutely. They're a company they're still doing it, so I hope they're still complete. They're doing QBD, and they're based in Cheltenham. And we're using Origin. So it's the Origin series of windows, bifolds, and French doors that's going in, and they've got a really good range. They're really, really competitively priced. There's lots of, and don't take Do not take what you're being given as your pricing for granted. Make sure you do go and shop around. And also, they have a really fast turnaround. We had a situation with a couple of windows that needed to be remade. They turned that around in 48 hours.
Yeah.
So
That,
whilst they've
that in itself is another beautiful thing to have with something a manufacturer you're working with, or
oh,
supply.
and they're based in the UK. I mean, they're a UK company, so
Yeah,
you're not shipping it to Germany or
yeah.
So yeah, definitely a big shout out to Origin and QBD.
Awesome. We'll leave it there. There you go, QBD. Free shout out for you. And thanks for coming on, Charles. And thanks for
Thanks,
listening,
man.
everyone.
Thanks.